The jurors who convicted Conrad Murray of manslaughter is speaking out exclusively to ABC News. Eyewitness News reporter Miriam Hernandez was in the courtroom when the verdict came in, and she's here now to tell us what juror number 5 is saying about the deliberations. Miriam.
Well, what we're learning is that in the first hours of deliberation, the majority of jurors sided with the prosecution. The evidence showed them that Conrad Murray was criminally negligent and caused the death of Michael Jackson. But it was not a slam dunk for everyone. For the first time, we hear what really mattered to this jury and what didn't.
We all thought he was a nice guy, a good doctor, a good cardiologist. I think he just got too far over his head.
Juror number 5, Debbie Franklin, mother of 2, a paralegal, describes the 9-hour deliberation that followed the 6-week trial of Michael Jackson's personal physician.
It was stressful that whole morning. It was a lot of work. We did yelling.
She says nearly half the deliberation time was spent listening once more to Conrad Murray's entire recorded interview with LAPD.
He took a Valium, but then I gave him additional medications.
Some of the jurors wanted to hear his tone of voice throughout it, how he was describing things, and they thought that that was important.
Murray's recorded words, they decided, contradicted with his excuses that came later. Why he didn't call 911 when he found Jackson unconscious. Jurors say Murray's call to a staff member reveals he deliberately stalled.
He says, do not call or don't call 911. We can't let people know what's going on here or something to that effect. But at one point he says, don't call 911.
Other failure, says Franklin, Murray's agreement to give Michael Jackson any amount of the sedative propofol, then leaving the room.
Even if Michael Jackson injected himself, which I don't think we believed, but we felt even if he did, that wouldn't have mattered because Conrad Murray brought the situation there. He was the doctor. He was in charge.
Another issue that didn't matter, Jackson's history with other doctors and the painkiller Demerol.
He didn't die from that. It wasn't in his system when he died.
And we will have more of that interview with juror number 5 ahead on Eyewitness News at 5, including their debate and their beliefs on how that fatal dose of propofol was administered. Reporting live from ABC 7 Eyewitness News here in the studio. Leslie, back to you.
I think we really did our job.
She is juror number 5, Debbie Franklin, the 48-year-old mother of 2, a paralegal, put in charge of ringing the buzzer that alerted the judge and the world a verdict had been reached.
Our hearts were pounding to go out there.
Franklin is the first and only juror to reveal what went on inside the jury room. In our exclusive interview, she says while nearly all the jurors had decided on guilt during the first day of deliberations, not everyone was convinced that Dr. Murray was solely responsible for Michael Jackson's death.
Towards the end of the day, we finally took a vote. It was not unanimous, and we talked a little more about it. Let's think about it over the weekend. It was stressful. We did yelling, and we had to keep saying, nobody talk while this person's talking. Raise your hand if you have something to say.
And it was not until Monday morning that the majority was able to convince everyone that not only was Conrad Murray negligent, his mistakes led directly to the killing of Michael Jackson.
Do you believe Michael Jackson would be alive today if it were not for Dr. Conrad Murray?
Yes, absolutely. I believe he had issues. I believe he had addictions or dependence. He'd asked other doctors to do it. They said no. He was looking for somebody to say yes, and Conrad Murray said yes.
Juror number 5 says Dr. Murray is responsible for killing Jackson for 3 reasons: not calling 911, not having medical backup equipment in the room, and leaving his patient alone.
When he came back, Conrad Murray said he was alive. He wasn't breathing, but he had a pulse. He had the oximeter monitor on his finger. So at that point, he was alive, according to Conrad Murray. We felt if he would have had the medical equipment there, if it was the airway that was blocked, he had nothing. He didn't have anything there.
And while the jury thought Conrad Murray was a nice guy who didn't mean to kill Michael Jackson, they decided he as a doctor should have known better and found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Was it a show of hands vote?
It was a show of hands at that point, and then we asked everybody to write it down. So we actually had the written papers of 12 guilty votes.
The jury was ushered out of the courtroom before the judge decided to send Conrad Murray directly to jail. But this juror, at least, had no regrets seeing the former doctor let off in handcuffs.
I never gave it a second thought of what was happening back in the courtroom. When I saw it later on TV, it didn't shock me, but I assumed that if somebody's found guilty, that they're taken right from the courtroom. I don't think he was going to say, go home.
Juror number 5 says she has no opinion on whether and how long the sentence should be for Conrad Murray. She says she did her job, and she's glad sentencing is up to the judge. George?
Fascinating stuff. Thanks, Jim.